Hello and welcome to our very first podcast. This will be a series that we will be doing monthly and hopefully maybe more often as we go forward. But this is going to be entertainment
Entertainment.
recast. Entertainment recast. So, our channel's main purpose that tried to establish here is to take existing entertainment and grow it, make it better, change it, review it, and take what's already been done and respread it to the masses in new ways, in innovative ways. So for this podcast style that we want to do is we just want to talk, go over different topics and different things that we've discussed in our free time over the years and just really put it out there for others to see and view and entertain. So the first thing that we want to really do is a series on film and how it regards changing medium. So adaptations, books, other films, TV shows, video games being adapted into film and films being adapted into those other mediums. And what works, what doesn't, and how it all goes. And to start out today, we will be talking about video game adaptation. So, this is kind of just an open discussion that we'll go back and forth on. And the way we want to do it is the person whose topic is leading will be the one leading discussion, and this was mine. So, John, let's just start out talking about this kind of stuff. So, what is it what is your feelings on video game adaptations into film specifically? How your knowledge of them, how you understand them to be, just general discourse on that topic in general.
Oh, that's okay. When it comes to video game adaptation to film, for the most part, it doesn't usually work out very well. Like, it's kind of just like a historical thing. There's kind of this idea going around of the video game curse, which isn't really true because not all films that are adapted from video games are bad or have poor reviews or do poorly in the box office necessarily. I mean, even Resident Evil, those films aren't like widely regarded as great films, but they still make a great deal of money. To like, even the last one that they filmed, I think made more money than any of the other ones previously. So it's not to say that there isn't like a market out there or it's not doable. It's just kind of a thing of it doesn't usually work out very well. Like there's just a view in our culture that doesn't really work.
Yeah, it's there's definitely a stigma when it comes to video game adaptation. There's this joke that's been thrown around for a long time that if you want to make a bad film, make it from a video game.
Yeah.
You're just guaranteed for it to fail for any number of reasons. Bad adaptation, character change, medium change, people not understanding the source material, people not understanding what makes it what it is. That's exactly right. Like, this is the kind of stuff that always bothered me. The reason I really want to talk about this in general is because we've had this recent release of the Mario film,
right,
that came out recently. And it was done once before in 1993. So literally 30 years, like exactly 30 years later, They finally make one that is a lot closer to the material. Still not necessarily greatly reviewed by critics, but audiences enjoyed it. People enjoyed it. You and I enjoyed it.
Right.
I actually kind of enjoyed the original one, but it's a messy film. And there's something to be said for, like you said, fun, money. A lot of these films that aren't even really good adaptations still make money. A lot of them do. And it's actually kind of interesting because you'll see a lot of fans of the video games mock the film for not being faithful to the source material, yet it's still making a ton of money. So why does that work?
Well, there is something to that. Like you just mentioned, like some video game fans will watch the movie and they're not happy with it. And I think that's kind of one of the bad things about the film industry when it comes to video games. A lot of film executives and stuff like that, when they get a hold of a property, They don't just copy the property. They want to change it. They want to reimagine it in a way that unfortunately angers the fans of the property who already are buying the games. But then the people who buy the movie like the movie and they're not interested in the games or they're very confused on what the games actually are about. Think about Resident Evil. Going back to that, it's a successful franchise, right? Mm-hmm. Not at all related to the source material.
Not really. Like maybe some Easter eggs here and there, but really it's a completely different medium.
Yeah, exactly. So some people who are like hardcore fans of Resident Evil would watch the films and be frustrated, angry about it, but the film still did really well, and they're regarded as not great film, but not bad movies.
So I can twist that a little bit in another direction. So they had the new Resident Evil television series, and I watched that, and same thing. Has very little to do with the source material. If anything, it might actually even be a little closer to it, but it's hated by fans of the games and audiences in general. And one of the things I noticed about it is at least the film series was entertaining, despite it not falling. The new television series was really poorly put together and difficult to follow at times, and it didn't follow source material. So it's almost like there were a lot of people that liked it. They were people that knew generally nothing about the source material and liked the kind of style that it was being done. But all in all, I found it kind of boring and messy. And that's not because it's a video game adaptation. That's just because that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And I think you hit the nail on the head there saying that it doesn't have to be honorable to the source material to do well. It just has to be good.
Yeah.
But being close to the source material, I think, gets more people enamored with it. Well, gives it more following, more long-term success with the medium exchange.
Well, absolutely. I think that the closer you are to your source material, the more that you're going to please the fans. But the other thing is that if you're making a movie off of a property, that property already has to be relatively successful. If you think about it, you make a Super Mario movie. You don't make what's another Nintendo property? I don't play a lot of Nintendo. So
Kid Icarus.
Sure. Let's go with that. I've never heard of that. So
that's a good point.
Let's go with
exactly that. The two biggest names in Nintendo would be Legend of Zelda and Mario. Those are two really big ones. And there's some other bigger ones. Metroid is a decent one with a decent following. And there's some others. But those two are the flagship that even ones who never played the games at least know something about the material. It's become pop culture at this point.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I don't really play a lot of Nintendo. I have a Switch, but I play it very rarely. I play it when I travel, and I don't travel much. Well,
that's kind of the next thing I really want to get into is that difference in mediums and how it relates to pop culture. So one of the things, like you just said, that makes video games a popular medium to adapt into film is the popularity of the medium. If video games are very popular, so making games out of them, making movies out of them makes sense. But you're going to pick ones that people know.
Yeah.
Unless your goal is to not use the source material as a marketing scheme. I can't think of a single instance off the top of my head where anyone made a movie based off a video game but didn't want anyone to know it was based off a video game. Like, they're very clearly made from the video game. Like, the movie Doom is like, this is the video game Doom on TV, and it's not, but it's...
Well, and the issue with Doom, I haven't watched it personally. I don't watch a lot of really poorly rated films unless it's for Curb Stomp. But
right.
The thing about Doom, I have done a little research on this. Doom, the reason that it failed so badly is because it was so far away from the source material, nobody could identify with it, and it was so generic and bland, nobody was interested in it beyond the fact that it was called Doom. So you alienated your core, your core fans who play the game by disrespecting the game, and also they made the whole like process of the game like, yes, it's scientists who are experimenting on things, but they were experimenting on teleportation, which they demonstrated in the movie they already knew how to do expertly, because they literally teleport to the base.
Yep, so you ruin the entire setup of the film by showing the very thing that caused the catastrophe they already figured out how to do. So this is just a fluke. That's kind of something I want to talk about, some examples. So we talked about Doom. We talked about Resident Evil. A few other good ones to talk about. We talked about Mario. Another good one is the Uncharted film, which was a fairly recent one that came out. We also have Tomb Raider, which we had actually 2 separate adaptations. We had 2 films with Angelina Jolie starring in the early 2000s, and then we had a newer one that came out, I think 2017.
Right, and both of those Tomb Raider games are technically based off of different Tomb Raiders, if you think about it.
That is correct. So the original one was based off the original Tomb Raider games, and it does a decent job of like kind of getting the character and world a little bit. It's a little campy, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. I think cinematically, for critics, it was panned a bit. The plots were kind of obvious. It had all the cliches, but again, it's based off a game with those cliches.
And it was popular enough. It made enough money. They made a sequel.
Yes.
They would have made a third one, but Angelina Jolie actually backed out.
And that's exactly it. Like this could have been the next 5 or 6 films that they did for Resident Evil. It could have been that. Like they just kept making films of this. The newer Tomb Raider was built off the newer Tomb Raider games that came out more recently, and this was like an origin story for her, where as the original movie, she'd already been operating. She's already out in the field. All the games were in that same vein. The new one, she's new. She's green. She's not as confident as the original one. She's younger. So there's a little bit difference in that character. And the film pulled in a lot of elements, even did some shot-for-shot scenes from the game.
Right.
Because the games are cinematic. So that's actually kind of want to go into with those examples we just talked about. I wanted to talk about the idea of what makes video games good for film and why certain ones are better for it than others. Mm-hmm. So the big one, the big elephant in the room, Mario Brothers. It doesn't have a story.
Yeah, 1993's Mario doesn't have a story.
No, and to be fair, the games don't have a story.
So actually, like, if you really think about it, when it comes to Mario Brothers, the reason that 1993's failed and 2023's succeeded is, like, partly 1993's failed because there really wasn't that much stuff going on with Mario games, but that's not to say that there wasn't enough source material.
That's correct. There
were
enough.
4 or 5 games out already, which is interesting that they didn't really draw from any of those, and they went completely dystopian and completely out of the norm. And part of that is the film executives wanted to cash in on the popularity of the name. They didn't care about the actual game.
Yes.
In fact, when they were making the movie, the Nintendo straight up said, "Oh yeah, this film is like these games are so flexible they can handle almost any reimagining."
And I will say, to be fair, they could have handled the one they did, but they didn't even do it. They didn't dedicate to it.
No, and the other thing is
they could have gone full into the dystopia, but they didn't use it well. The film was still messy, despite that. To a way, they're almost right. The main plot of Mario was 2 plumbers transported to another world that has dinosaurs and mushrooms in it. That's basically the whole plot, and they save a princess. They have Bowser kidnaps the princess. Mario and Luigi save the princess. They have those elements in there.
Yeah,
but it's a mess.
Well, and part of that is just because the production of that. The thing is that Super Mario Brothers isn't a great example of a video game movie because it's not a great example of a movie, period.
Correct.
The actual production and everything behind it is a nightmare. You got all the
same thing with Doom. Doom ran into the same problems. It had a lot of production issues. They couldn't agree on anything. There's several other video game movies that have flopped on their first try, follow that same thing, where the executives, the people in charge, they can't agree on anything. I wonder often if people fight. Some want to be closer to the source material. Some people want to do their own thing. You see this with movies adapted from books all the time.
Sure.
Adapted from TV series. The same issues affect video games as well. But that having been said, there is something to be said for certain video games being easier to adapt because of what they are.
Yes.
Narrative-based games adapt better. We had a very successful television series that came out of man, now I forgot the name of the game. The Last of Us.
Yeah, The Last of Us.
Last of Us had a very successful because the game is a movie. The game is all narration with these small parts of gameplay that you can easily pull out of and just leave it standing, and then it's a series.
Yeah, and the thing is that actually brings up like an interesting idea. Is I think a lot of video games would better benefit from being television series than movies, because video games average playtime is, what would you say, between 8 and 12 hours?
Depends on the game. Highly narrative games tend to be shorter than heavy gameplay games.
Well, I mean, The Last of Us is like an 8-hour game, isn't it?
Last of Us, I think I spent 16 hours playing
16 hours.
But yeah, yes, exactly. So yeah, so if you have a 1 hour episode, you could do 8 episodes of that if you just stick with the narrative really easily.
Yeah.
Now, that having been said, though, for me personally, I guess what I'm trying to get to is a lot of something I don't think anybody wants to hear that I'm going to say is probably a little maybe not controversial, but maybe a little jarring for most will be, honestly, I don't think that true video game fans will ever get a film that's going to give them what they want, because even narrative-based games have gameplay.
Yeah.
And one of the things that changes between video games and film is immersion. When you're playing a video game, you become that character because you're controlling that character's actions. Now, a lot of the story happens outside of the gameplay. So you're gameplaying, maybe doing puzzles, combat, whatever, and then you get into a narrative point. But here's the thing. The narrative is driven by the gameplay. Tomb Raider is a great example of this, especially the new one. In the new Tomb Raider, you might be playing through an area where you're trying not to get killed by these monsters, so the tension is really, really high. And then you just finally escape the monsters, and then you get grabbed right into a cutscene by a villain, and he throws you against a wall, and he's like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And it's a cutscene. But that cutscene playing by itself doesn't have the same tension as it did when you just had 20 minutes of gameplay of you fighting for your life right beforehand. And then immediately after the cutscene, you maybe escape and get away and slide away, and then you're immediately in a roguelike stealth game where you're just trying to get around all these enemies that just had you and you're trying to get by. You just can't build tension like that in a film or even a series, because that transition is different. Now, I agree with you. Series do a better job because they can still build that tension by showing it, even though you can't play it. That gives more time to build those intermediate elements between the story elements.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still going to be hard to adapt, because if you take some of these video games and just take the cutscenes out, some of them are about an hour and a half movies, like the cutscenes cut together. You can almost make a film. Right. You adapt a little bit of the gameplay into the transition scenes, and you got a movie. And that's not what makes video games fun. What makes video games fun is the parts where you're controlling the character in between those steps.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You hit this earlier when we were talking. Part of the thing with The Last of Us was the story is really interesting, and it's great narrative. You know, it's great. It's got a great narrative drive, but the gaming itself isn't super duper great. So therefore, it's a little easier to make it into a TV series, because it is mostly cutscenes. It is mostly the story, and you're walking through these set pieces and things like that. And the combat is very rare. It's not really the reason that you're playing the game.
Yes.
You're more interested in the story. And there's plenty of video games that are like that, but they would adapt much better into series.
Yeah, so another great example I have for this is Heavy Rain. I know it's a game that you haven't played, but Heavy Rain is a narrative-driven game.
Right.
The gameplay is basically relegated to mini. You're like, turn the thing to wash a dish, or you move your character around to talk to things. It's almost like a point-and-click adventure kind of a thing.
Kind of like, not, what is it called?
Like Monkey Island, or there's so many games like this.
Yeah, the one game where the sister has a brother who's like a ghost.
I think I know what you might be talking about.
Yeah, I forget what it's. Maybe it's like Beyond Rain.
Beyond Two Souls.
Beyond Two Souls. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
also very narrative game.
That would be narrative. Yeah.
Another good one is that I really enjoy these narrative games. They're fun because you're watching it. Your choices are what guides it. So it's like some of these BioWare games where you have like a lot of choices that drive the narrative, but that's all the game is. There's not gameplay. It's literally just choice-driven narrative, and that could be you're still in control, even though it's still technically you're almost watching a series, but you're in control of the choices being made. Another one is Detroit Become Human, or you're just playing a narrative and controlling the narrative.
Or Till Dawn.
Yes,
Till Dawn is a great example, actually, of a video game that can only ever be a video game. Those kind of games can only ever be video games.
That's how I feel about Heavy Rain and Detroit Become Human, because it's
entirely driven by your choices. It's based off of your actions.
Heavy Rain could make a good film because the narrative ends the same. The bad guy is the bad guy, and the way it goes is the same way no matter what. Your choices just determine how you figure this out. Detroit Become Human has hundreds of different branching narratives. Like, it can end. It's a game that's almost made for streaming. Like, you can watch other people play this game and see the different things other people have gone. And when you're playing it, you can see the branches, and you can go back and replay sections to try to find other branches of the story. And it's so deep and so involved that no medium compares. And that's something only a video game can do. And trying to adapt that to film, it would lose all of its.
It would use what makes it, yes. What makes it unique.
But it would make a good film. You could make a film out of it. It would make a good film, but you'd have to choose which narrative you want to go with.
And that's the issue, though, is part of the driving factor of people buying and liking those games is the choice factor. Like, think about the Telltale games. Telltale usually makes their properties off of things that already exist so that you have the freedom to interact with the world. Right. In a new and unique way that's specifically to you and your choices and how
and Telltale you decide to made a big deal about making games and adventure-based games in worlds that were established for very different reasons. So they did one for Borderlands, which is a RPG shoot 'em up.
Yeah.
And they made a adventure game in that world that was story-driven. They did a Batman one. They did a Guardians of the Galaxy one. So they did these, you said, in established mediums in a way that you can't make a film out of, but they make films out of these things. So it's a separate medium. And I think that's part of the problem. So maybe the next thing I really wanted to go through is, we talked about this because why we make them? Who are they for? Who is a video game film for? Because we've talked about a lot of this medium with video games is never really going to truly please a video game fan. Because it's never going to give them exactly what they want, because you already got it. You played the game, especially one that with a lot of cutscenes and narrations. You've already played this story. What do you think you're going to get out of a film that you didn't already get out of the game? So I don't know if it's really for them. Who is it for, in your opinion? What do you think?
So, all right, I'm gonna kind of go on like a little bit multiple ways to approach this. Okay, so who are they for now? As they're being made now, the way that movie executives and stuff like that are making video game movies, they're for who they think would like the game. They're made for people that they think want to see their game on the big screen. The thing is that executives, I think, don't understand how different of a medium video games are to books. So they make it for the fans of the property, but it doesn't appeal to the fans of the property. Because if you make it in accordance with the game and the game's super great, nobody's going to want to watch the film.
Right.
Like, that's the thing, is if you follow the narrative of the game too much, nobody's going to like that. The people that are, that play the video game don't want to just rewatch the game that they already enjoyed. Video games nowadays don't even really have the replay value that they used to.
Right.
Okay. So they're trying to make it for the video game audience, but they don't understand that the video game audience is different than a book audience or a comic audience or any of these other things. They want to take this popular property and just make it into a film because the ultimate goal of all media is to be put to film, is the idea of a film exec.
That's a good point. Something we talked about a little earlier was that, and I do stand by my statement that a video game fan is never going to get the same enjoyment out of a film that they get out of their game.
Yeah, and that leads into my second half of here. Okay, so
yeah. Just real quick. That's what I meant. Is you just said the executives look at this and go, nowadays it's, hey, here's your video game. We did it faithfully. We do good. We do good, and it's like, yes, actually, I watched it. It's an amazing adaptation. It's an okay film. I enjoyed it very much. But it's never going to be the same as games. Mario games, in a way, are actually a little more fun because there's not a lot of real narrative in those games. It's the story, the plots are very simple, and so there's a lot more you can do in film.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of games out there where just adapting the game straight up, even if you do it fully faithfully, it's going to fall a little flat sometimes. And so that's I like that point that you give. And then go ahead to your second one.
Okay, so second half of this is, how do you make a video game adaptation for video game fans? All right, like we need to consider that instead of taking like the formula that Hollywood's already trying. How would we appeal to a video game audience? And I think the answer is we take the character and we put them in a new adventure, a unique adventure, an interesting adventure that's set between your games.
Okay, so
that would sell more because you're not in control of the adventure or anything like that, but you're already invested in the character because of a previous installment that you've already played, and it leads into the next installment, but it's also a standalone adventure of sorts.
So that's something they did with the Final Fantasy Advent Children, which is a sequel to Final Fantasy VII.
Okay.
It takes the characters from the game and puts them in a new adventure, and it's really fun to watch because it's unique, and it's unique story that's not in the games that extends these characters, and I love it. It's an absolute a blast to have a continuation of these characters. Another example of kind of what you said would be the Prince of Persia film. So okay. Prince of Persia is a completely different plot than the game.
Really?
The villain is kind of the same person, but it's very different in the way it's handled. But I really enjoyed it because it was unique from the game. It took cues from the game, but it was a completely original story. And I liked that, but it was almost close enough to this original story that it made it a little rough to buy it. But I really enjoyed that film. It was fun. Was it the best movie ever? No, but it was fun. I don't think it actually did incredibly well either, but
no, it's a flop.
Yeah, and another one that flopped the same way was Assassin's Creed.
Right.
Assassin's Creed was built to be canonically in the same universe as the games, but it takes a completely different character. I absolutely loved it. I loved that movie. It was a blast. And in original characters and an original time period that's not done in any of the games, but they have a couple of characters in the film that are in the games as well as background characters. Like one of the execs of Abstergo is like a character from the games. So they took a few cues to make it in the same universe, but it's a unique property. That's a great idea. I don't know why that one failed, other than it was, I think when I talked about this a little while back, that part of the problem that hurts a lot of films is homework. If you have to do homework for a film,
yes.
Part of what I think another thing that I think kills a lot of video game movies is that studios have a hard job of trying to make a film entertaining for everybody.
Right.
But also gathering fans of the film. The Assassin's Creed movie stands alone by itself, and I feel very strongly that it does a very good job of introducing the world and the characters. You do not have to know anything about the games to know what's going on in that film. So I'm not sure why that one failed, other than people just didn't understand what it was.
Well, Yeah. Nobody likes to do homework, going back to your point. And the thing is that a lot of times it's hard to bridge the gap between existing fans and new fans. Existing fans don't want to be reintroduced to a character for half of a movie because they've already played video games that are about that character. And so they understand that character in a way that if you screw it up or if you change the formula in any way, they'll notice, and that's no longer identifiable with the person,
right,
or the character. But you need to also introduce the character well enough that people who are new and haven't played the game can enjoy the character, feel for the character, and experience.
Which, to your point, it really makes sense why it doesn't work so well in film and it works better in TV series, because you have a lot more time to introduce the character and still give a lot more story after the fact. In a movie, if you spend 1/3 of a movie introducing a character you already know, all the video game fans are already bored because they know this part. Yeah. The other people might be intrigued, but then you get to the second part, the video game fans are like, oh, this is interesting, this is what I know. And the other people are like, I don't understand, this is tropey. It's like you can't please everyone, so they try to please everyone and end up pleasing no one because they don't know what to do with the property.
And the other thing, going back to the tropes, video games are full of tropes.
Yes.
Uncharted and Tomb Raider are almost identical plot-wise, if you really think about it.
The new ones, yeah.
Lucky adventurer goes on a plucky adventure. Shenanigans ensue while they're in the pursuit of some ancient truth or civilization or village, and something supernatural or supernatural-esque happens.
It's incredibly cliched on the story, but the point is the gameplay.
Yeah. That's what sells it, is the gameplay and being involved with the characters and stuff like that. And it's character-driven narrative, too.
Yes.
The characters are fun and interesting.
When you put that on a film, it's just like any other. It's like, well, this is just Indiana Jones with different
this is just cheap Indiana Jones. Like, the thing is, like, I enjoyed the Uncharted film. Don't get me wrong. I bought it. Like, I buy films that I like. I have Tomb Raider and Uncharted in my collection.
I do. I liked both of them.
Yeah, they were decent films. The thing is, though, that when it comes to Uncharted, they made some issues. They made some mistakes. And the thing is that some of the mistakes that they made were, first of all, their casting decisions weren't that great. We get so used to the way that a character is. And the thing is that when a character is 100% human in a narrative-driven format, it's hard to see another person as that character. That you almost have to hire the voice actor of, and I'm talking about
90% of the hate for that film was, why no Nathan Fillion?
Well, okay, so Nathan Fillion would have been a good casting choice for Nathan Drake. He's not the voice actor.
No,
but he's not. He loves
the voice actor.
He
does
make
like a cameo in that film, which is fun.
Yes, he does.
Nolan North shows up, and that was good. But Nolan North also doesn't look anything like Nathan Drake.
No, he doesn't. And that's the thing is, like, you have to. That's one of the issues with 100% like human character. Okay,
so a good caveat to this actually would be Star Wars. So the Star Wars television shows have been converting a lot of people to live action.
Mm-hmm.
Ahsoka Tano got a live action character, and there was a huge uproar that the person who played her voice wasn't playing her.
Right.
And for one, she doesn't look like her, but she looks enough they could have pulled it off. But she herself said, I'm a voice actor, not an actress. I'm not really familiar with this medium, and I'm not comfortable with it, and I want the fans to have something good. She had her blessing, and people are still angry. But people get so used to the look of the character. It's a humanoid character that has now a different actor playing them. And they're doing the same thing with the other characters now. They've got several of the other characters from Rebels are making live action appearances, and they're having to make that work.
And the only ones that are working are the ones that are CGI generated. Because you can hire the same voice actor, and they sound the exact same, and they look almost the exact same.
Yeah, and so
translating to live action,
and that's part of the problem. But if the character does it well enough, they endear to it.
Yes.
So people now see. I forgot the name of her who plays Ahsoka now. She was in. She was the nurse. It was night nurse in. The new Daredevil. She was in that. I can't remember her name, but she does a really good job of it, and people have started to accept her now. And that's the thing. Television series give you enough time to accept the character. Films, you have to accept this character from beginning to end, and then it's over. And then people don't have that investment of a second episode to watch to then kind of keep pushing it to the point where they accept.
And the thing is that it's just it depends on the video game too. Here's kind of the thing about the video games if you're going to make them into live action films.
Well, that's another thing. Live action versus CGI. CGI, voice acting is a lot easier to get away with for characters because you make them look the same at least.
Yeah, Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah,
Ratchet and Clank. I didn't play Ratchet and Clank as a kid. I played it as an adult when the new Ratchet and Clank game came out. I played the new Ratchet.
Yeah,
and Clank
where where they rebooted the series. Yeah,
yeah, kind of. But when they made the one for the movie, I played that one because it was free, or it was like super discount or something. Right. But I played the game, and I realized that they made a movie off of it. And so, because I had never played Ratchet and Clank before, I watched the movie, and I loved the movie.
The movie's fun.
The movie was fun.
I like Ratchet and Clank film was a fun one, and it's literally the same exact plot as the game, like verbatim.
Yeah.
And it works. It's the same. I think it was in the same voice actors.
Yeah, they were the exact same. And the thing is that they carried everything over. And if you play the game, you get everything that you're going to get out of the movie, plus everything else that you want in a video game. And the movie that came out with it, they came out like the same time is the other thing too. They were made.
I haven't actually played the video game anymore. I played the original Ratchet and Clank series.
Yeah.
I played the first like 3 games and then a sporadic mix of some of the later ones. So I played Ratchet and Clank, Up Your Arsenal, and a couple other ones. They're a lot of fun, and there's some good bit of narrative in them. There's some slapstick humor and some fun stuff in them, but they're only slightly deeper in narrative than a Mario game. It's mostly just shoot 'em up stuff. But the film was an absolute blast.
Yes, the film was a lot of fun.
It follows the plot of the first game.
Mm-hmm. That's
the plot of the very first game where the good guy superhero is actually betraying you and he's working for the bad guys. That was the plot of the original. The new one, from what I understand, they reworked it a little bit to fit the film better. But yeah. Great. I loved it. It was a fun film.
It was a fun film and it was a fun video game. Like they made them both at the same time.
I don't think it did well either.
It didn't do well. A lot of people didn't like it because, partly is because Ratchet and Clank has died in popularity. Well, there had been so few games.
That's what I was going to say.
In recent times,
did they fail miserably because people didn't like it, or just nobody saw it? Because
nobody saw it. I think because I don't see any real issues with that film, if I'm being honest. But like I said, I haven't played the Ratchet and Clank games. I didn't play them as a kid. I was introduced to it as an adult.
And so you as never playing the games really and liking the film. I was a big fan of the games and played the film. Like I said, I didn't play all, but I played 4 or 5 of them, which is a good chunk of them. Yeah, I even played the one on PSP, Secret Agent Clank. I had that on PSP, so I've played a lot of these narrative games. These games are fun for the but I'm starting to feel like video game movies fail, not because I think what execs are getting wrong is they don't fail because they're not doing it to the source material correctly, or they are doing it too close to the source material. I think they fail because most people just don't understand what they are. They see a film based on a video game and they're like, I don't care about that.
Yeah, or it's timing.
Yeah,
that's the other thing too. Sometimes the timing is just really off. Like if you had released an Uncharted film 10 years ago, 2013, and you released an Uncharted film at the height of it before the last Uncharted game came out, that would have been successful. That would have been interesting.
That's a good point.
Like, think about when Tomb Raider came out.
There was that large gap between the third and the fourth one. They could have dropped a film in there. And
if you dropped a film in between the two that takes place. It's an origin
story film. So, like you said, it takes place outside of a zone that the games touch.
Yeah.
The games kind of hit on him, meaning solely, but it's very little bits. This whole film is an origin story for these characters. All these characters who show up in the games, him having already known them.
But that game has, or that movie has a lot of issues. Like, as a fan of the Uncharted games and the movie, I like the movie, but I'm not gonna lie, it has a lot of issues.
Okay, name some.
Mark Wahlberg plays Mark Wahlberg, as he does in every film Mark Wahlberg is in.
I actually liked him as Sully.
He's not a good Sully. To
be fair, in the game, Sully is a little more reserved earlier on. And
Sully is reserved and he's sarcastic and he's more of a father figure and stuff. They made Mark Wahlberg Sully Mark Wahlberg. and an action hero.
I didn't bother as much because Sully is also like Sully's even younger in that film than he is when he meets.
Yes,
in the game.
He's way too young. He's like, I get it. They wanted him involved
I think he's
in
probably the right age. He just Mark Wahlberg looks way younger than he is. I think he's like
probably
40, like late 40s, but he looks so much younger than he is.
Well, the thing is, you got to have a guy who's a little bit older, a little more like, doesn't sound like he's from Boston. Is the other thing. Like Sully's kind of a worldly guy. He sounds like he's cultured. He sounds like he's been around a little bit, but he's also sarcastic and he's a bit of a father figure and stuff like that. Mark Wahlberg and Tom Holland, their chemistry and their dynamic was so much different than Nathan Drake and Sully in the film or in the movie.
I agree.
Or the game. Oh my gosh.
I liked their dynamic. Maybe it's because it was different. I guess that's another problem. Some people want to see something different than what they're used to, and some people want to see the same thing. I actually enjoy it when it's unique and different because it's interesting, because then I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know these characters. These aren't the characters I'm used to. This is different. This is interesting. But that doesn't always play out well if you don't know what you're going to do with it. And
well, the thing is that
another reason probably why they fail, because people can't agree on what they actually want.
Well, the thing is that if Sully, the secondary character of the game, is nothing like the one that's in the video game, how are you going to have Nathan Drake be the same? Well, Nathan Drake is so become the same shaped.
Over time. Like you do this as an origin story, and then you do a different one with Nathan Fillion and somebody else. Now, okay, so there's a fan made
right
Uncharted on YouTube that's really good. And it's Nathan Fillion, and I can't remember who plays Sully, but they do an excellent job of those characters. Right to the game.
Yeah.
It's really entertaining. It's fun. And that could have been the movie.
Yes.
But I liked the movie they made.
And like I said,
you can lead into that. This is them when they meet, and then you show them late. Like, I can believe those characters being the same characters as this film, though. Like, over time, their dynamic changes, and they become more in sync. And Sully, as he gets older, gets more reserved. I know that even in the games, when it shows Sully younger, he's still reserved.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do that. You can have Sully be a wild card and him mellow out. Like, this kid helps him. Maybe as he becomes a father figure to him, he becomes less.
But if you're really going to have that happen, they have to be at the appropriate ages. That's the other thing. Tom Holland, even though he's a very young actor, is too old to be Nathan Drake just meeting Sullivan.
That's a good point. Nathan Drake of the games is in his early 30s.
Yeah, when you're playing him, yes. But when he meets Sully, he's like 14 or 15.
That's what I'm saying. So when he meets, I think he's even younger than that. I think he was like 12 or 13. Yeah.
Yeah, he ran away with his brother from
he's really young when he meets
from
him
the orphanage or something.
And so Tom Holland is like the same age almost that adult Nathan Drake is when they meet.
Well, he's at least over 21. He's probably about 25.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's what they were shooting for, was him to be about 25.
Yeah.
And Sullivan's like supposed to be in the film, he's supposed to be like 35 or 40. They're too close in age.
That's a good point.
They're too close in age. The dynamic is entirely different. It's entirely foreign to the one that's in the video games. And the characters that you like in the film or in the game, I want to do this the entire conversation. The characters that you like in the games have a much different dynamic than this movie will ever be able to establish, just because of the fact that Nathan didn't grow up with Sullivan. He doesn't have the same amount of trust as Sullivan. He hasn't experienced all these things that he did with Sullivan.
Also,
and he's not
became
shaped.
A criminal on his own. Like, Sullivan is the one who trained him to be a thief, right?
Yes.
Where in this one, he's already thieving on his own, and Sullivan just helps him hone it to a purpose. But they're antagonistic most of the film, which was an interesting dynamic. But you're right;
it's a great dynamic and stuff like that. It is not. It's not for an Uncharted film,
right? But it's separate. This is part of the argument that people make, where they're like, just make this film, but call it something different. Well, but it's on. I actually will argue against that point, because if you're going to make it close enough to the source material, you might as well name it that. Another example of this is actually a book to film, which is kind of a little bit different than the video game, but it's a simple issue. Is Jumper. Okay. So in the book Jumper, The book and the film have the same premise. A kid has the ability to teleport. In the book, the climax is he's fighting terrorists on a plane. In the movie, they invent the Paladins, an entire organization of people that hunt jumpers specifically and kill them. And that he fights them. And that's a whole invention of the film. And it's really interesting and fun. And it's completely a deviation from the dynamic of the characters in the book. And I really enjoyed it. Most people, when it came out, didn't know the source material. The book was not very popular. It wasn't well known. The film did okay, but I don't think it did very well. It was Hayden Christensen's second acting role, and people still attacked him for it, but there was some interesting direction. But overall, the plot change was fun for me. Any fans of the book were probably alienated by that. Oh, right. This is nothing like what I'm used to. The character's different. I think you make a good point. I think you're right. If you want to make a video game right, what you do is you take the characters as they are and then stick them in a unique plot.
Well, and the thing too is if your character is like human, realistic human, all right? Like
make them look close to
do they have to look close to the source material? They have to sound roughly close to the source material. Like think about The Last of Us. They look pretty close to how they look in the video games. Yeah, you could have had Troy Baker be Joel, but they did fine. They're also cashing in on Pedro Pascal. Yeah, Pedro Pascal's popularity. The man's in everything. But anyway,
what they did with so another good example of this is the Han Solo film, where they have a completely different actor play an existing actor. So that's a film to a film, and that suffers from some of the same problem. But had they made the character like Han, people would have bought him as Han.
Yeah.
Problem is in the film, they make him very different. They make the younger Han more like the later Han, where he's a little more heroic than the Han earlier on when he's a rogue.
Yeah, which is an issue with the film.
Which makes you not buy the character. People did not buy the character because it was a different actor. They didn't buy the character because they wrote the character differently.
Right.
And so it doesn't work. Video game adaptations are the same thing.
Yeah, you have to be close. You have to be close enough to the video game and the way that the character in the video game is, in order for you to have the same feelings and things like that. It's more believable when they're the same. And the thing is, when they're human, and I'm saying human, like making the distinction because Mario is technically human, but he is cartoon.
But he's a cartoon human.
Yeah,
and they made a cartoon movie.
Yeah,
that's actually an interesting point because the old film. The guy who plays Mario
doesn't look anything like Mario.
He doesn't. He
looks like roughly what Mario would look like.
Mario would look like if he was made into a human.
Yeah.
And the guy who plays Luigi, what's his name? He looks actually kind of like he's a little taller. He's thinner. The dynamic is fine if they were made full size people, but.
If they also didn't have a 20-year age gap or 30-year age gap.
Exactly. And you keep every time we talk about these films that don't work, the problems we often run into are silly little things. So another one I really wanted to talk about in all of this was Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter was a video game film that is very faithful to the source material in its environment. They take the monsters, the creatures, the things from that world, but it's a completely unique story in that world. It's an original story in that world, and it works. What actually derails the movie for me is that they start out in our world and warp to that world. That didn't need to be there. It doesn't really hurt the film, but it doesn't need to be there. They could have just done the entire film in the Monster Hunter world, and it would have worked, and it's a fun homage, but it's kind of a really messy film. Like, the movies, as a movie, if I were watching that as a moviegoer, knowing nothing of the source material, I would probably be very bored or confused by it. But as a fan of the games, it was awesome seeing those things real. Another one is World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft is a game that is, or I think it was just called Warcraft.
Yeah, it's
just called Warcraft. It's based off the first game. It's not even based off the World of Warcraft. It's based on the original RTS game from like 35 years ago.
And see, that goes back into timing. That goes back into timing. You need a release the game when it's at the height of popularity and people understand it. It is at height of
popularity because they released it when they were re-releasing the Warcraft 3 game, and they released it at a time, Battle for Azeroth, which the expansion of World of Warcraft was being played at the time, was a homage to the original war that game was based on. So it was very for the players of the game, it was very relevant at the time. But it's a movie no one really cared for. I enjoyed it. It's a fun film. The acting is a little stale with some of the human characters, but the orcs are the most interesting characters. The acting's really good. But it takes all the characters from the games and the events that happen from the games, like lore-wise, it is a dump. Like for a nerd like me that's a big fan of the lore of the games, it is so faithful to the lore. And it's basically a $1 billion commercial. Like it's a World of Warcraft commercial that they made it to a film, is what it is. And it's incredible cinematically and everything, and it like bombed. Like, nobody wanted it, so nobody cared. I'm really starting to feel like what video game movies suffer from more than anything is just nobody really wants them.
Well, that's
People
true.
say they do, but nobody really does because no one goes. Fans, not enough fans go to see them. People who don't know the material see that it's a video game film and get turned off. I almost feel like if you made a video game film, don't say it's from a video game and just make it, and people will probably go see it and enjoy it.
That's part of the reason Tomb Raider was so popular. Video games were still a relatively niche audience at the time. So some people were just like, Angelina Jolie is pretty popular and she looks really good.
Well, that's
in
part
this
of
film.
I think that's
the film was interesting.
So Mario is a game that like everybody and their mother knows. My parents, my grandparents know Mario. Like everybody knows who Mario is. It is pop culture at this point.
Yes.
I feel like for a video game movie to be successful, it either has to be so pop culture that everyone knows what it is and is willing to go give it a shot, regardless, because they're just aware of it. Or it has to sell itself as a film first. And if that's going to be the case, like you said, you need good talent to sell it. You need people. Mila Jovovich sold the first Resident Evil game was sold because people knew her as an action star.
Mm-hmm.
And
she's not even based off of any characters in the game.
Nope, she's a completely original character in the game, but they did well because she sold the films. And she was also in Monster Hunter. And I think they thought that may help. I think it actually made its money back. I don't think it was a loss. But I don't think it was enough that they felt confident making a sequel on it. But the director of the film was a fan of the game. He actually started playing the game, playing World, a few years before he made the film. He was like, this is really fun. This would make a fun film. And so he did it. And then had his wife star in it. And it's actually not a bad film. It's fun, and it's really honors the source material. And you can tell the director played the game. Like that's the thing. Like you can tell the people who made Mario played the games, or at least watched somebody play them because they knew what they were doing in there. And that's the creators of the 1993 Mario. You can tell they probably never touched a video game in their life.
Oh, they had no idea. They had no idea what they
were doing.
They had no idea what they had.
No, they didn't.
And they didn't have enough. Like the thing is that when it comes to video game movies and stuff like that, you have to have enough callbacks and stuff like that to please the fans of the property, while at the same time having new and interesting things.
Which I think your point makes the best point. I think the best video game films are original stories set with those characters. The Mario film that we liked was an original story.
Yeah, it's an original story that has a lot of cues and a lot of Easter eggs and stuff from the other games. It's entirely original. It is a fresh enough plot that you could believe it, and you could definitely see it being a Mario game because it follows enough of the core formula and stuff like that for Mario. The other thing is that I think Mario benefits from this. Every Mario game is almost the exact same story-wise. They have very similar motivations. They have very similar characters.
In the main series of games, it's Mario, Luigi, and friends save Princess. And in a few of the games where Peach is a playable character, they're usually rescuing somebody else. Okay, well,
and they're always fighting Bowser.
They're always fighting Bowser.
Yeah.
The side games do some interesting story, like some of the RPGs, like with Super Mario RPG, the Paper Mario games, the Mario and Luigi games have narratives with full stories in them, which would make really interesting plots for movies. but they never touch those games because they're not as popular with the people. If you made a game based off that series, you might get some of the fans excited, but the layman who knows the basics of Mario will be confused by it. Why is Peach? Why is this the way it is? Like Peach, when it's the main party. So we'll get wrapped up here shortly, but in the new Mario film, a big plot point is that it's Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Toad are like the main cast.
Yeah.
And those are the main 4 playable characters of Mario Bros. 2 and Super Mario 3D World.
And one of the more recent Mario games that came out.
Yeah, those 3D World, I think is.
Oh, yeah, 3D World.
Where they're the 4 playable characters. And they kind of pay a little bit of homage to that. So there's some homage to those games that break the formula, but it still follows the Save the Princess formula, a good bit of it. It's a unique, fun story.
Yeah.
You're right. If we want to make video games that move into movies to work, you're gonna have to either pick. I think you pick a lane. You either pick the world and put unique characters in that world, or you pick the characters and put them in a unique story.
Yes, absolutely.
Assassin's Creed is an example of a unique character in an existing franchise. You take them and put them into that world. Tomb Raider film is basically trying to reshoot the game into a film. Uncharted is a slightly original take on characters, but the world and the adventures they do are very similar to the game.
Well, the stakes
are the same.
So Uncharted and Tomb Raider, like between the two, I like the Tomb Raider film better.
It's more faithful to the game.
More faithful to the game. But the thing is that it was purposely more faithful to the game. It had the shot for shot. It had the different references and things like that. The problem is that they took the idea and they shortened it to an hour and a half. In fact, they could have benefited from going a little longer. I think they made an hour and a half film. It could have been 2 hours.
It felt short.
It felt short,
especially
and rushed.
When there's a large scene in that film where she's chasing some boys because they stole her stuff. And I was like, this isn't what we care about in a Tomb Raider film.
And it's not even from the game.
Like 25 minutes of that film could have been put into the part of the island and it would have been better. But
I think that
extended more as well.
That film, they should have had her on the ship and doing like flashbacks of her earlier years and stuff like that in the game. Yeah. And immediately have her deserted on the island. Like that was the cool part of that game. That was the cool part of that story. I think if you're more faithful to the way that the game actually was, like more people would have been happy because it is an interesting enough game. It's a unique twist on the character and stuff like that.
Story-driven game.
And the casting was really good for that movie. Like the actress they picked for Lara Croft looked exactly like the one from the game.
She acted like her. She sounded like her. Like and there's this moment actually in the end of the film where she gets 2 pistols. And it's kind of homage to the original series.
Yeah.
The games, the old ones before the new game.
Yeah.
So they even paid a little bit of homage to like Angelina Jolie's.
Yeah, and the thing is that from then on, they could have really mixed the 2 characters. They could have mixed the old Lara Croft with the new Lara Croft and made it like its own thing in its own universe with its own adventures and stuff like that. And that got me excited for if they were going to make another one. They didn't make another one. They're not going to probably.
So there's another. So the last thing I wanted to talk about before I wrap up here.
Oh, I had other points and stuff. I had other stuff.
We have more stuff, but one thing I specifically do want to get in here is another point of topic is the future of video game films, and like even good ones, why so many of them don't get sequels or don't get a continuation. So the reason I bring this up is because we have the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
and everybody wants to copy it.
Yeah, and you took an existing established universe in comics and put it to film, and they made it work. And one of the things that you and I have talked about in the past is that Marvel differs from other comics as they are very character driven. Most comic books are story driven. DC is story driven.
Image
comic, yes.
Dark Horse.
Dark Horse is very things like Spawn and his character development is based very much on the environment he's in. That's very important to his character. Other than very few characters in Marvel matter where their story took place. It matters what their story is. Marvel's character driven. So you could take a Marvel character and drop them in almost any story and make it work because the character is what matters, not where the character is. There are a few iconic ones, but Spider-Man's about the only comic one. Whereas in You can't imagine Batman without Gotham. You can't have Spawn without Hell. You can't have Hellboy without the whole Hitler-esque World War II thing. Like, that's a big part of the story, is their origin.
Yeah.
So it matters. Whereas any of these Marvel characters, like, what's Wolverine's origin? He's from Canada. What's Spider-Man's character? He's from New York. He's even been from different places in New York. He's been from the Bronx, or he's been from Queens generally, but other places. Doesn't matter. He's in New York. That's where he belongs. You're so loose with those characters, you could do anything. Video games, a lot of video games follow that same thing, where the characters are what you become attached to, because their video games are character-driven narratives, because you control the character. Right. You are the character. And so if you take the character-drivenness and put that in almost any story, as long as it's entertaining, you can probably get away with it.
Got him.
So the issue comes to now, when it comes to the future, even ones that do that don't get sequels. Sonic, the new Sonic, got a sequel. Sonic that's another one we should have talked about more. Sonic video game is another video game film that actually did well commercially.
Well, if you think about it, though, that part of the reason that the Sonic movie did really well is because the actual backstory and lore behind Sonic is so vague and confusing, nobody actually knows it. So they get attached to the character, and you can make the character do almost anything as long as he looks like Sonic, acts like Sonic, and has the mannerisms of Sonic, and does what Sonic does in the game. You could put him anywhere, and people would like him.
And that's the same thing with Mario. But they still messed it up the first time.
Well, they messed it up the first time because it was a mess of a film. But the thing is that Mario is iconic. You know what he acts like, what his characteristics are, what he does.
Sonic is
make him do those things in any world, and it'll work.
Sonic and Mario are both things that have had successful TV series based on.
Yeah.
Sonic is on its fifth reboot series. I mean, they had the original Sonic series and then a sequel Sonic series that was different. Then they had Sonic Underground. You had Sonic X. You have Sonic Boom, and now they have a new one on Netflix. Like, Sonic has had mediums of television shows that have done well, and the Sonic films do really good job of paying homage to that. I liked the sequel better than the original one because they pay a lot more homage to the games.
Okay.
And the environments from the game, and there's a lot to it. And it got a sequel. Mario will probably get a sequel. I hope it does.
Oh yeah, no, I 100% believe that.
But I'm upset that Tomb Raider didn't get a sequel. I'm too. Like I said, I really liked the original Tomb Raider, and I thought that they could definitely take some creative liberties and stuff with the character like that. Not only because, there's a trilogy of games that they could follow, but you don't even have to follow those games. You literally could take the old material, mix it with a little bit of the new material, have a little bit of this and that, have her go on an original adventure. That's fun. The issue that I had with Uncharted, okay, so going back to my thought, the issue I had with Uncharted as compared to Tomb Raider is this. It paid a little too much homage to the games. And it did it in a confusing way. It recreated famous scenes and really cool stuff. Like, they created the whole thing where he's in the crates and stuff like that. It's iconic. That's Uncharted 3. Literally, that's how they sold the game. But it felt forced into the story. I agree.
And the thing is that
okay, and to that exact point, there's another scene in Tomb Raider where she runs across the plane. Mm-hmm. And that's a scene directly from the game where you cross the plane and the plane tips and you have to get through it in a quick amount of time. And if you don't, you go down with it. And they took that exact scene from the game and put it in the film, but it works in that film because it's natural progressed. Whereas you're right, in that one, it does feel a little. I do like how they do it, where he wakes up and then it goes flashback. Kind of fun, like they do.
No. Don't get me wrong. Uncharted is a fun film. That was just the first thing that came to my head. That was a nitpick.
No,
the main issues I have with the Uncharted film is the casting.
Yeah.
And the fact that the story is roughly based off of the first one, but it's supposed to be taking place before the first film. But the thing is that the age of the characters does not fit into the origin of the actual thing that's established in Uncharted 3, while also playing a scene from Uncharted 3 when it's supposed to take place before the first game.
Okay, so
makes no sense.
You're right.
It does not
fit. I think honestly, it seems that the miracle formula for a good video game film is to pick a video game that is so generic that it's easy to make a film out of. Because the most successful ones now have been Sonic and Mario, and like we said, these are fairly generic characters that don't have a lot to them. Like Sonic has had actually it's the opposite. Mario is incredibly generic and never talks in like anything.
Yeah, so having Chris Pratt voice him isn't that controversial of a thing. People just hate Chris Pratt for some reason.
I know, and not just having Chris Pratt voice him, but just having him have a voice is just that's the controversial thing entirely. So it's like if they made a Legend of Zelda film and then Link speaks. Now people say that Link is mute, except for that's not true. Link does talk because characters speak in response to what he's saying in many of the games. Oh, what? Oh, you're saying this? Okay. Like they'll speak for him. So you're talking to like Princess Zelda in the game on 64, Ocarina of Time, and she responds to things you're saying that your character's not actually saying. So he's not actually mute. It's just people are speaking for you. So he does talk. He just doesn't actually show him talking.
Well, part of the reason that they didn't give him a voice, I think, was because they wanted you to identify more with Link.
So that correct.
And when you give a character a voice, it alienates you from the character in some way.
To a point. Except for even though the Tomb Raider games, even though I'm watching this character and seeing her in cutscenes, I started to relate to her in a way where I felt like I was her.
Well, no. And I think that it's just because of the age of the game. I think that the idea was that, and they just have kept it that way.
Yeah.
Because originally it was, if we had a voice of this character, the character is going to become an iconic character to the voice and stuff like that. Because if you think about it, Mario doesn't talk all the time.
No,
he doesn't talk in the game.
Even when he talks, it's just voices. He's making sounds. And,
woohoo!
And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
In that exact same game, people speak for him. Mario in Mario 64, you're talking to a Koopa in the first level. And he's like, "What is that? Oh, you're saying you're looking for such and such? Oh, well, let me help you out." Like Mario's talking, but they don't show him talking. It's just in the dialogue.
Yeah.
It's like games, like a lot of BioWare games where your character doesn't speak, you choose dialogue and then they respond to your dialogue.
Yeah.
So another controversial game that did this was Fallout 4. All the other Fallout games, your character had dialogue was all chosen. In Fallout 4, your character actually speaks the dialogue.
Yeah, they do.
And that was controversial because people were like, "I don't feel like I'm playing this character anymore." And they were always first person in the newer one. Like Fallout 3, Fallout Vegas were first person. The other ones were top-down isometric games. But those games had dialogue back and forth. So it's not like that was an established thing. They just changed it. And it threw people off at first, but then people get used to it. And that's the thing is people can get used to something as long as you do it in a way that's clever, makes sense, is natural, and they can follow along with it. You don't lose your audience. And I think too, people they treat their audiences as they're dumb.
Yeah.
And you don't have to talk down your audience.
That's just an issue I think with a lot of
that's an issue with film in general. And that's the problem with video game films is that you have all the same problems that films in general deal with, and then the other issues of adaptations in general, and then video games being a very unique medium. Books suffer the same problem sometimes because in books you can tell people's thoughts easier. You can do first person is easier to do. You can be more immersive in the story, more imaginative, and people always have a different way of what they think of things. But some of the most popular film series of all time are based on books, so that doesn't have the same thing. You know,
I think it's just because books are easier to adapt to the film.
They are easier to adapt to film, and especially books that are very dialogue heavy. Because if you're doing like especially something like sci-fi or magic, like Harry Potter, for example, world building is a large part of those books. You have to build the world. Whereas in a film, you can just show it, and so it shortens the narrative of the book easily by just cutting out all the explanations because you're just showing, and boom, that goes away.
Yeah,
video games
already have their own established visuals. They have their own established characters. They have their own established voices and their own established stuff.
When you go from a book to a film, you're not degrading the medium. You're changing it to a visual medium.
Yeah.
Video games are already a visual medium with an extra step, which is an interactive medium. They're visually and interactive.
Yeah, you're taking away at least 3 things when you're taking video games and making them into movies. You are losing your interaction, which is the big part of why you play a video game. Mm-hmm. You're losing time that you can make in the game to get more comfortable with your character and do all these different things. And you're also losing out on like side quests and different things like that. And 3, because you're missing out on all the side quests and all the long missions and the boring missions and all this other stuff, you're missing out on character development. You literally have to take 10 hours of material that people enjoy and people like and has been written specifically for 10 hours and condensing it to an hour and a half. The other thing is that they make the film so short.
Yes. Well, this is why we say, I agree with you completely, that video games adapt better to television. Because television gives you the time to develop the characters you get. The Witcher series, now the first 2 seasons are based off the source material to the games. The games take place after the original books, short stories that were written. They're based after that. This is based on that material that's alluded to in the games and some even shown in some points and talked about. The stories that they talk about happening to these characters in the games are shown in the series. So it is a prequel to the games, but the character is believable. They do a good job of developing him and showing him he's so faithful adaptation to what we're used to. And it is the games version. The book version is a little different, but not too much. It's a pretty good adaptation of it. The games do a pretty good job of following the Geralt from the source material.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's very interesting. And I have seen a ton of video games successfully adapted into TV series for years, and the films tend to fail. Mario was a TV series around the same time it was a film. The TV series was very popular and did well. The movie flopped. And this has been true of so many things that even the Resident Evil series, even though that I had my issues with it, it did pretty well, I think. So.
And that goes back though to character design and things like that. If you take a video game like Jak and Daxter, Jak 2, Jak 3.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like they're very popular games, good games with good stories and good characters, good narratives. That would look terrible in live action.
Oh gosh. That would have to be a CGI film.
It has to be a CGI film because it wouldn't even look right animated, like 2D animation. It has to be a 3D animated film. Just because the character design, you can't replicate that in an actual
that was
person.
Something that suffered a bit from like the Dragon Ball film. The narrative in that film is garbage, but the characters look weird, and they skip on all the animalistic characters because it would have looked weird. They literally only take the humanoid characters. They cut out all the animal characters, and the characters like Chiaotzu and like the really weird ones that are like odd. Tien, like they cut all them out and they stick to just the core characters because the humanoid ones, because it would have just I feel like they just were afraid to even touch it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it hurts from that. And there's a lot of mediums that don't translate well. Another one we could probably talk about for hours is like animated film. Same problem.
Animated film will never work.
That's not true.
No. It will never work. It can work,
but the anime already has to be more realistic. Like something like Ghost in the Shell or Akira or those films could work because they're mostly humans in specific environments. But when you're doing like the stuff that's in animation that animation does well, like over the top action and like super powers, that's hard to do.
Demon Slayer is a perfect example of this. Demon Slayer will never be a good live action film. All of the characters are humanoid. Yes. Even the demons are humanoid to an extent.
But there's too much mysticism.
There's too much mysticism. There's too much action.
So the
Avatar: The Last Airbender is not going to do well.
Film had the same problem, and this is what a lot of video games suffer from this because a lot of video games use the CGI of it to a great effect.
Yeah,
like Jak and Daxter, where these are humanoid characters, but they're very unique characters. Ratchet and Clank.
Borderlands. Borderlands, they're all humanoid, but it would look really weird in live action.
I don't know. I think Borderlands
it leans into its art. It leans into its art style.
It does. I think you could pull it off in live action, but you'd have to adapt it a little differently.
It could be done quite right.
But Jak and Daxter will never work in live action.
Well, yeah, Jak and Daxter never work in live action.
Unless the Uncanny Valley is completely destroyed from CGI. Yeah. Okay, so to that point, in Mandalorian, they dropped a character from Rebels, who's completely animated the same way as this film, and it's interesting, but he's really Uncanny Valley is heavy in that.
Yeah, he doesn't look like he's there.
Animated character in the live action film, and it's a little off-putting. It's buyable, and it's kind of a fun nod, but it's a little jerky and difficult to believe. Animation would have to get to the point where we're animating these things like Pokemon.
Pokemon works.
Pokemon works because they didn't directly adapt the creatures in their original animation form.
Right.
They reworked them into more realistic versions of them.
And the thing is that they play it well enough that it works really well. Yes. See, that's another thing is just like Detective Pikachu is an interesting study in and of itself, because you talked about earlier how you kind of need to do the main games. You can't do like a side game. Detective Pikachu is a total side game. It is a DS only game, and not a lot of people bought it. But it's
a
works.
Narratively driven game.
Yes, and it works really well as a film.
It worked because it's a standalone game with a set narrative.
Yeah,
and it worked so well. Detective Pikachu is a great example of another great example of a video game adaptation that works. Detective Pikachu worked really well, and it doesn't need a sequel because the game got a sequel because the game didn't finish the narrative, but the film finishes the narrative. It loops it back to the narrative and it finishes it.
Well, also I think it was a little bit different, wasn't it? Detective Pikachu, the actual game, isn't the Pikachu smart? Like
no, it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
Pikachu talks and everything.
Well, no,
but only he can hear him. Other people can't hear it.
Yeah, no, but isn't part of the movie's narrative was the fact that his father's brain, like his father's.
So that's hinted at in the games, but it's not.
Hinted at in
it's
games?
Not made clear. I have not played the sequel. I've only played the first one.
Okay.
So I do not know if they tag on the sequel, but they hint at it in the first one that his dad is the Pikachu. Like that's hinted at, but it's never made very clear, like perfectly clear. And the director of the game even said as much. Like, okay. Yeah, we kind of hint at that, but we don't really get into it. And we're going to take the sequel a little bit different way because we already did that with the movie. So it looks like that was their plan with the game, but because the film came out, they redirected the sequel. But I have not played it, so I don't know how different it is. But that is hinted at in the game. That is a possibility. It's not made clear enough for it to be definite.
But anyway, yeah, it works really well as a film.
Man, this has been so much fun. We're really enjoying this. My last question that I had, or kind of like my wrap-up thing, and then we could talk some more after that too, but my wrap-up for this whole thing was good examples, bad examples. We've talked a lot through this whole thing of a lot of video game adaptations.
Yeah.
I want to give a few of like, I'm going to twist it up a little bit since we've done that. I'm going to give some of my favorites, good and bad, ones I liked, even if they were good or bad, and give, not really give reasons because we've talked a lot about that, but big one off front, the new Mario.
New Mario movie's great.
Great example of a great film. It plays great homage to the source material. It does enough originals to still be entertaining and original. The story is very basic, but it's fun, and I enjoyed it.
It is very basic, but the thing is that it works because it is a Mario film. If you go into a Mario movie thinking that it's going to have a great, deep, interesting, unique plot, you've never
played a Mario game.
Well, I've never actually played a Mario game all the way through, but I don't.
You don't expect much from it.
Well, exactly. I know for a fact that when people are buying games like that, it is not for the story. It is for the fun and the unique level design. Like that's kind of the selling point of Mario. Is it's a successful franchise and it's mainly for the action and for the level design. It's not really for the narrative.
Correct.
In fact, the fact that they can just kind of recycle the same narrative over and over and over again and keep selling Mario games talks to the fact that you don't have to try too hard to make a successful Mario story.
Exactly.
It just has to look like the game, interact like the game, and the character's got to be like the character would be believably in the game.
Right. So that was Sonic was one I really enjoyed, especially the second one. And it takes place in our world rather than the Sonic world, which there are a few games, and there's an entire series, Sonic X, which does the same thing. So it's established. It's not like a unique thing like they did with the Smurfs, where they do the same thing and it doesn't work because it's not what the Smurfs ever was. It works really well in Sonic because it's been established before. They use a lot of the source material. They do a good job of it. Gun, an organization that shows up actually is in the sequel. There's a lot of fun stuff. I just had a really good blast with those two films, and I'm really looking forward to more of both those series.
Yeah.
Detective Pikachu is one of my favorites. That one was really well done.
Yes.
Some issues with the plot here and there, little pacing problems, but otherwise it's just a fun movie, and it does a really good job of homage to the game that it's based on.
Yeah.
I like the original '93 Mario Brothers film, but I like that one, an antithesis of these ones. It's not like the games, and so it's a unique, interesting story, and the visuals are just really fun in that movie. The visuals of the dystopian world are just amazing. Like, there was a moment where all three of us were watching this movie, and we were just silent for like almost 20 minutes because we were just taking it all in, because it was just unique and interesting. But it's a mess of a film, and it's not based on the source material, so it fails in those 2 points. But it's a guilty pleasure of mine because it's unique and different. And then another three that Monster Hunter I really enjoy because it's on the source material. I really like the Assassin's Creed movie, and I really liked Prince of Persia. Those were three films that take elements of the source material but make it a unique original story based off. So those are some of my favorites that I've seen. Then there's a ton more we talked about. I liked Uncharted. I liked a Tomb Raider. I'll let you talk more about those. You really like Tomb Raider, so go on some of yours like that you really like and why.
Yeah. I really like the Tomb Raider films. Like all three of them have their own uniqueness to them. Like I like the Angelina Jolie films a little bit, but that's a little bit of nostalgia goggles. I saw them when I was a kid.
I actually really liked them too. I saw them much older. I went and saw them 2000. Well, I saw them in theaters when they came out, of course. But I was like, I was an adult when I saw them. I was like my 20s. So
yeah, like I saw them when I was a kid because they came out 2001 and 2003 or 4.
Is it that early?
It was early 2000s.
That doesn't sound right.
It was late 90s, early 2000s. The games were still coming out. It was still PS1, PS2 era.
I mean, they came out Underworld came out in like
2003.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I like the Angelina Jolie films because they're high octane, they're high adventure, high action, stuff like that. I had never played the Tomb Raider games as a kid. I wasn't allowed to. I think they were rated T, and my parents were super duper strict.
It was 2001.
Yeah.
Man, I was in high school when that came out. I thought I was older. Maybe I saw it later. I don't know. I saw the second one in theaters. I know that. Man, that was a lot longer ago than I thought.
Yeah, like I like those two because the nostalgia goggles and stuff like that. I saw them when I was a kid. When
I actually saw them, I hadn't played the games yet, so I saw both those movies before I played a single Tomb Raider game, and then I played Tomb Raider Anniversary Collection after that, and played through all the games, and then played through Tomb Raider Underworld and a couple others, and then I played through the new ones, and I played with them fairly close together. I played with the I think I first played a Tomb Raider game. That's what I was thinking. I saw it at the same time the movie. I would have played it way after. I first played a Tomb Raider game in like the 2010 era, and then I played all through the old games, and then a couple years later played the first of the new series. So I played them all really close together, and then saw the new film. So I was like, films, all of the games, film. So it was all in capped really close together. So I was like, I got to compare them in real time, like real close, and I enjoyed all of them. Yeah. The old games, the new games, the old films, the new films. I like all of them. Yeah. And they're all unique and different in a lot of different ways. Sorry to take from you.
No, that's fine. And the thing is that it's believable that both of the actresses that they picked for Lara Croft fit into the game that they're representing.
I agree completely.
And so it's very easy to just get into the mindset of, okay, this is Lara Croft, this is what she does, and things like that. And it's faithful enough to the games that there's no real complaints. I don't know the original Lara Croft games. Like I said, my parents were very strict on the video games that we were allowed to play. And Lara Croft was too violent, or the pixels were too sexualized or something. I don't know what it is. Let's just put it this way. My dad had weird stuff.
I never played when I did play those games. I never thought, oh wow, this is a sexy character. No, it's Tomb Raider Anniversary was the first one I played, which was on PSP, and it's a remake of the first game with like the graphics of like the Underworld series, like newer. And that was my first introduction to the series, and it was fun. Like I enjoyed it, but I never thought like, ooh, who Lara Croft. it would have been weird because I almost felt like I was her. Like I'm the kind of person that emotes really strongly into my characters. Male, female, doesn't matter. I become them. So I'm not looking at another character that I'm like wooing at. Like I am Lara Croft. Like I feel like I'm her, like facing these things, and I start to become the character. And I do that in almost any video game I play.
Yeah.
And so I can mold into anyone's. And me being the weirdo that I am in games, I actually relate more to the female characters in games more. So like any games that have like the female lead characters, for some reason I identify better with them than males. So whenever I can create a character, I often create a female character because for some reason that's just my weirdness. But I can identify with anybody. Like I remember playing Uncharted and being like, I'm Nathan. Like I'm like Nathan Drake gets shot in the shoulder. I'm like, ow, why'd you hit me? Like not why'd you hit him? Why'd you hit me? Like that's how I get in these games. And so I become the character. And I remember I was playing another game I did this with really heavily was which is kind of a weird series to do it with, is what now I forget what it's called. Now I'll probably remember it later on, but it's the games you're playing the God of War, and then the God of Death, or the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. You're playing as the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Come on, I know you know what I'm talking about.
Darksiders?
Yeah, that's the one. Darksiders. In Darksiders, I'm playing the third one, and you're playing as Fury, and she's like this like 9 foot tall like demon woman with a fire whip, and like I'm fighting a boss, and she gets hit in the shoulder. I'm like, ow, freaking hit me! I'll kick you back. And like that's how I am. I was like, this is like as far from me as possible. Like this character is nothing like me, and I'm completely in the character.
Yeah.
And I'm just like that with everything I play.
Well, and that's the fun part of the video games. That's kind of the thing, is that there's always going to be that permanent disconnect between the movie adaptation and the video game adaptation. Is You're not going to get as emotionally invested in the character as a fan who has played the games, is the thing.
Correct.
And the thing is that when you're introducing the character, either you're going to bore the fans that are already established, or you're going to offend the fans that are already established. It's just unavoidable, because either you need to change the character enough that they're not kind of a shell that you can put the player into, so you need to add different elements that might break the character, or you're going to have to add too much exposition to the character. You're going to bore people.
With video games is a lot of video game protagonists are empty shells so that you can imprint on them. An empty shell doesn't work so great as the protagonist of film. A film that we actually watch that does that is Sucker Punch.
Yeah.
The main character plays like the main character of a video game.
Absolutely.
Like she's an observer in her own film. That doesn't work in a film.
No, it doesn't. And that was the big
game that would have been really interesting
if
you were playing her, because you're actually her watching the other people.
Oh, absolutely. That would have been a great video game.
But
I would have played that.
Exactly. But on the film, it doesn't work. Okay, so
yeah, so back to my experience with like video games and stuff like that. The Tomb Raider games, I really enjoyed the Tomb Raider games, because the one that's based off of the new game I enjoyed because it had just enough of the video game in it that I was like, I remember the good times I had when I was playing this.
Nostalgia hits
it pretty hard, but
I think that plays into your Uncharted dislike, is that the nostalgia did not hit for the games as hard. It felt too unique.
But the thing, so I'll get into that. The Tomb Raider game did it right though.
Yes,
it was a similar enough story that I was like, okay, this works with the film. And then it's different enough that I'm like, okay, I'm interested enough into learning the twist and stuff like that. They did a very good job with that film. I wish it had done better and they would make a sequel. The issues with Uncharted is going back to the fact that they have callbacks to the game, but then they establish that it takes place before the first game. So you're telling me that the unlikely scenario that out of a C-17 Globemaster, Nathan Drake is dangling off of cargo that's attached by net. You're telling me that this happened to Nathan Drake not just once, but twice. You know, like
that's fair.
When you add Easter eggs and stuff from later stories, like
I see the film as a separate thing.
But they tried to sell it as it was in.
They did.
They tried to sell it as this just the reason that Sully is so different and he looks like Mark Wahlberg and the fact that Tom Holland is playing Nathan Drake and he's younger than Nathan Drake in the games is because this takes place almost immediately before the first game. That's how they tried to sell it. And the problem is that there's too many Easter eggs and there's too many things that play back to later stories in the games that it takes you out.
That's something they did with The Witcher. They were like, hey, they used the games to market that and then waited till it came out to say, by the way, this has nothing to do with the games. This is completely original. We're never going to touch the games. We're actually going to avoid them entirely. And they're like, okay. So you use the games to get it out there and then abandon them.
Yeah.
That's a little bit dark. But yeah, that's a good, you're right. Marketing has a lot to do with how films work. And that might be another big issue with video game adaptations is marketing. A lot of them are marketed as video game adaptations in ways that are unfair. They will market them as faithful to the original when they're not. They'll market them as they're part of the same universe. They'll do different marketing techniques to get you to watch it, and then you find out that it's not. You've been lied to. Like they'll lie to you to get you to go see the film.
Or they pick the wrong thing. They pick the wrong thing to focus on in the film.
What did Mario focus on? All of the Mario trailers pretty much just show Mario and them using power-ups. Like
in the Mushroom Kingdom, yeah.
That's the trailer.
Yeah.
That's the whole trailer. Whereas in Sonic, a lot of the trailers showed Sonic doing Sonic things, running, doing it showed him the loop-de-loop in the Green Hills.
Yeah, and Jim Carrey as the doctor.
As Dr. Robotnik.
Yeah.
Those were really great homages to the source material in the trailer.
Yeah. Well, it also helped the fact that they actually listened. The other thing is that they also listened to the fans and did that major change. I went to that movie because I wanted to support the studio for listening to the fans. I never played the Sonic games as a kid. Once again, I only had a PlayStation growing up. That was the one video game system that my dad bought or won because my dad is extremely cheap. He may have won it because we just randomly got a PlayStation.
Fair enough.
And so we only had the PlayStation 1. I got the PlayStation 2 when the Slim came out. Like it was pretty late when I got the PlayStation 2. But so I didn't play a lot of these video games and stuff like that. I didn't play Sonic. My friends had played Sonic and they talked about Sonic a bunch. I saw a couple of the cartoons and stuff maybe. And the reason that I even went to see the Sonic movie wasn't because I was like, oh, it's a video game adaptation of this nostalgic thing. And no, I actually went because they had redesigned the character to look more like the game. And I wanted to support the studio doing that. That was just good. That's good marketing.
There's a big movement in the fans that was a stunt to get people to go watch the movie.
It worked.
I know. But here's the thing. There were articles written about that for a long time that were literally saying things like, this sets a bad precedent. You can't listen to the fans. If you listen to the fans, they'll run all over you. You can't do that.
Listen to the fans. They're not walking wallets.
I know the people paying for your stuff. Now, there is a trope thing where people don't know what they want because they'll say they want stuff. So a good example of this is people always say they want new and unique stories in video games or new unique video games, but what sells is always the 176th Medal of Honor game. Call of Duty, actually it'd be better because Medal of Honor died, but Call of Duty has, it's like Call of Duty, well, they on modern, they had Call of Duty 1, 2, 3, 4, Modern Warfare 1 through 4. They had the 3 Black Ops games, and then this just keep going, but they sell millions of copies every single time, and they're like, why would we make something original when you guys keep buying these? We make original games and you don't buy them. The highest selling Zelda games are the ones that don't break from the established formula. The highest selling Mario games are the side-scrolling platformers. The highest selling games are the ones that don't deviate from the pattern. The cult classics that are really... Psychonauts is one of my favorite games I've ever played in my entire life. It's an amazing game. It's a cult classic that didn't sell well. it got a sequel like 20 years later because the fans made a campaign to get it. This is the problem. Like, people say they want things, and then they make them, they don't buy them. They're like, we want this. We want this. Okay, here it is. Oh, I don't want to pay for it. I just want you to make it. Like, it's not. They're only going to make what you buy.
If you want something, you have to support it financially.
Yes. So if you want something, if you really want them to make more of stuff, go out and see the films. If you want to see more video game films, go out and see them. I did not see a lot of these films when they were new because I wasn't around. But like, I went and saw Monster Hunter in theaters. I went and saw Mario. I went and saw Sonic. I saw the first Sonic in theaters. The second one I didn't because I missed its run. But I saw it as soon as I could. Mario, I went and saw in theaters. I saw Tomb Raider in theaters. I saw Uncharted later.
Yeah.
And partly is because I missed some of these films, but I can't exclude myself from this. If I want to see more films, I should see them in theaters. I saw Assassin's Creed in theaters. I saw Prince of Persia in theaters. I saw all these games in theaters because I wanted them to do well. There is a thing now with streaming services nowadays. I imagine there's a medium for video game films to thrive in streaming rather than hitting theaters. And I'm hopeful that even if some of these movies don't get sequels in theaters, they'll get streaming sequels that will do really well. I'm hopeful that streaming will give a medium for video game movies that they haven't had in the past, especially with series. We're having, like I said, there's a new Sonic series that hit Netflix a little while ago. I'm about halfway through that one. I haven't finished it yet. And there's others. And, if you want these things that you like to do well, support them, spread them, tell other people about them. Make sure people know they exist, because otherwise it won't happen.
Yeah.
And the
money talks. Like, that's the thing, is money talks. If you like something, you need to support it financially. Sure, you can get it for free online and pirate it and stuff like that, but
that defeats the purpose. You'll enjoy it that one time, and you'll never get any more in the future because they won't make it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you get it for free, it shows not that you watched it and you enjoyed it and stuff like that. It shows that nobody bought it.
And to go off this point too, a lot of people, I've heard this said, well, if people really enjoy making things, they'll make them even if they don't make money. Well, they have to pay their actors and their producers and their staff. You think it's just actors? The thousands of people that work on these films, the editors, the CGI engineers, the people that do all of this stuff, they have a living to be made. Like, even if you're a creator that wants to make something interesting, they got to pay the people who make the film. So they got to make money, or the studio won't support them anymore because they can't pay their people.
Yeah, exactly. And where do you think the extra money and stuff goes? It goes into new projects and stuff like that.
Exactly.
There are a lot of companies that literally will take any profits they have, and sure, they line their pockets, but they also take that money and invest it in another property.
That's what producers do. So one of the things that these executive producers are doing is executive producers are funding these projects. That's why some of these projects are funded by the main actor. Like, you've had big actors, when they get big enough and make enough money, they start producing films that they want, stuff that they've always wanted to star in, or things that they want to see other people do. They'll produce them. Yeah. That's what they do. They take their money and they invest it in a project. Studios have some, but the most of the money that's in most films is by the producers. These are the investors. It's like they're like the public owners of of a company. They're the stock owners of a company. They're the stock owners of the movie. They are investing in this movie to make money back. There are producers that will invest in a film, whether Monster Hunter is an example of that. The producer was also the director, and his wife started it. He made the movie because he wanted to, because he thought it'd be fun. He didn't care if he made any money on it. In fact, I think he even said in the making of that he expected to lose money on it. He just wanted to do it because it would be fun. Those are rare. And those are usually people that are already well established in Hollywood. There aren't enough of those to make all the films you want reality. You have to get somebody that's willing to do it. And money makers are really the way to do it. And money makers, if you want those to happen, you have to invest.
Money talks. Money talks in this industry. And the thing is, it goes both ways. If you really hate something, don't give them your money. Yep. Don't buy the merchandise.
Yep. That's the big thing.
So yeah, if you like something, pay for it.
Bad to go and see it, and you can't always trust critics or even audio scores because people have different opinions and things. You can, even when you see a critic score of like 30, there's going to be 5 critics that gave it a higher rating. People have different opinions. Sometimes you have to see a film, but if you see it and it's garbage, let people know, and don't buy merchandise from bad films, or wait till 20 years later when it doesn't matter anymore, or
buy it from somebody who isn't directly profiting from that company.
We bought, we just recently got a piece from the Van Helsing film, which is kind of a mess. We bought it so far later, it doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. We did it as a set piece. This is stuff you can do. Just be careful and put your money where your mouth is. If you like something, pay for it. If you don't. Don't. Another example, you said pirating, right? So say, I'm not encouraging this, but say you already happen to pirate a film and you watched it and you really enjoy it, go watch it again in the theaters and give it your money so that they make more of those projects.
Or buy the physical copy too.
Yeah.
Buy an actual physical copy of Blu-ray. Give it something worth giving. You have to be involved in the things you enjoy for them to continue. Exactly. Because there's plenty of successful franchises and stuff out there that they just didn't make enough that they decided not to make anymore.
There are a lot of some of the most popular cult series and stuff didn't go very long because they were popular, but they were too expensive to make, and the popularity didn't match it. You got to put your money there. You got to watch the stuff. Now, streaming is a little harder because streaming is based off of you're paying a subscription for something, and it's a hard model to follow. A lot of studios are realizing this, that it's difficult to do views because even something people are easily distracted. I know I do this. I'll watch halfway through a series, then another series I want to watch comes out, and I go start that one, but then this one, and I'm like, squirrel. That makes it hard for them to track that stuff. But the other part of it, if your series is really strong, you don't get distracted from it. And there's series I watch all the way through no matter what comes out because they're so engaging that I'm in it.
Yeah, unrelated to what we're talking about with video game movies and stuff like that, but something that maybe we can talk about later is I honestly think that streaming services and stuff like that have a bit they've kind of ruined entertainment. Because it's taken the power away from the audience and it's put it entirely in the hands of the executives.
To a point.
Well, think about this. Think about this.
If people are canceling your scripts, you're right though, because what they can do is they're like, it doesn't matter if all of our stuff is good as long as some of it's good. We'll keep your money.
Well, and the other thing is that they're not necessarily funding projects that people are really interested in. Sure, they can monitor how many views you have, but you're paying a flat fee. And they're funding a lot of projects that you don't like, but they like because they're the executives.
That's fair.
So it's kind of taking the power out of things. So if you have the opportunity and something that you like is in theaters, go to the theater. Sure, you're paying a little bit to the theater itself, but that money goes directly back to the project. And it is marked down and earmarked as from and for that project. And it
is one of the easiest ways to track viewership because it requires you to leave. Streaming is too easy. You don't have to leave your home. It's right in front of you. You're paying a flat fee, so it's difficult to gauge audience reaction. Films, you go out to somewhere else to pay an exuberant amount of money to see, and that gets them interested. And a lot of projects they do in streaming is very much based off how box office things do. They look at how the box office do, and they fund projects that do similarly well for streaming, because they know it's going to be engaging. It's going to keep you watch. Because the biggest thing about streaming is engagement. They want engagement. They need you to continue to keep your eyes on it because they want you to stay subscribed so they can keep raising that subscription fee forever, and you're just going to keep paying it because there's always new content, which is hard to gauge. And films are a little easier to gauge, especially with theaters. Like we said, there's an involvement there that pulls you out of it.
Well, I mean, consider too, HBO. Okay, so you pay for an HBO subscription, right? Who asked for Velma season 2?
Did it get one?
It's been approved. I believe it's still approved.
Dear gosh.
Yeah, who asked for it?
That's honestly just being made because they want to make it. Exactly. Right, they want to make it.
And guess what? Nobody likes it. Nobody is actually going out of their way to pay for it or anything. But because you're paying a subscription fee, they have the money for it, so they're going to do it anyway.
They have nothing to lose because eventually you'll probably watch it out of curiosity or hate because there's nothing else on there.
There you go.
Even if you
don't watch it, are they actually losing money off of it? Like technically, yes, it's costing them money and things like that, but
that's actually a good point.
They're putting it into your subscription.
If they have a set amount of subscriptions and they're spending a set amount of money on content, it doesn't matter as long as that equals. The only time they're going to care is if the subscriptions start to drop to the point where they'll just cut projects.
Yeah.
Based on what the subscriptions are, because you still have enough old content to keep people interested, and they can keep adding older content for free. There's really not a lot of incentive. You're right. Like that's a good point, and they could probably use it as a tax write-off if it fails anyway.
Yeah, just think about it. Like, buy a physical copy of a specific DVD. They mark that as the money from that specific property for that specific property. If you like a TV show, get a physical copy. Like, think about it. If you
can,
well,
it's going away. But yeah.
Yeah, but if, like, let's say that you have, like, what's a good example here? You have I'll just throw a random subscription service. Netflix. You have a Netflix because you like Supernatural, because that was on Netflix forever. The only reason you have your Netflix subscription is because you like Supernatural. Buy the DVD. Buy the Blu-rays. Don't continue to pay the subscription service for a property they didn't make.
So much cheaper to just stream it. So much cheaper.
But it's worth it in the long run, because here's the thing. You buy, it's $200 for 15 seasons for a Blu-ray. It's Blu-ray, remastered, all the special features and stuff, $200, 15 seasons. You pay that once. People start taking notice, and they're like, hey, Supernatural's still making money. People are still buying Supernatural merchandise. They still like this property. They'll continue to make that property. They'll make stuff that you like, or they'll make stuff that's based off of the stuff you like, because other companies are looking at that.
Or they'll learn that they like stuff that's in that medium. So a good example of that is the Mario film. Like, if this mill is making money, if it didn't make money, they'd get the same. The original 1993 Mario film failed to make its money back. Had it made its money back, they would have made a sequel, regardless of how close it was to source material, regardless of anything. Had it, even in its exact state, had it made money and made enough of it, they would have made a sequel. And if the creators of the film didn't want to make it, they would have given the project to somebody else to make it, and it would have been made because it made money. There's a lot of terrible films that have sequels because they made money. They were either so cheap that it only could have made it, like Paranormal Activity. They cost them like less than $100,000 to make, and it made like millions of dollars. That doesn't matter if the film was garbage. It made so much money. Let's make another one.
Yeah, like think about how many crappy horror movies and stuff come out.
Yeah,
it's from the same people that came out with the last crappy horror movie, and people bought it. People went to see it because it was a horror movie and it was in theaters, and they wanted the experience. This money talks. If there isn't money, you can't make anything. Like, the reason that we aren't putting forth shows and stuff that we want and we like is because we don't have money. We have money for a YouTube channel, so here we are. If we started getting funding and stuff like that, we could take our actual ideas and we could put it into real projects. If we made a little bit of money off of like curb stomp and stuff like that, we could actually take our ideas and make an animated film off of that property because people like the content and they pay for it. I'm not saying that people need to pay for us, but you know what I'm saying, though. Like, money talks, and when you have the money, you have the power in Hollywood.
Correct. So I know we tangent a little bit here, but part of this format that we're doing here is not unedited. This is all raw, open, live. It's just us having a conversation and talking. And I wanted that because all of our other stuff is edited for content. I wanted something that was just us being passionate about what we're passionate about. So we're hit the 2-hour mark, which is about where we want it to be. To as a final wrap up of everything we've talked about today, we are going to have some future ones where we talk about some other mediums and such as comic books and other stuff that's going to really relate to this as well. But the last thing I really wanted to touch on is video game adaptations from film. tend to run into the exact same problem that film adaptations do. They tend to fail. And just a quick, my first comment on that is because a lot of video game adaptations from film have the exact same problem that film from video games have. Is video games have a narrative plus a gameplay element that entrenches you in the character, and a lot of adapted films from films to video games are just the film with video game play that is uninteresting or lackluster. It's just the film with some kind of gameplay element stamped onto it.
Yeah.
Have you played any adaptations?
Maybe like years and years ago, I played a Shrek game.
Oh, gosh.
Like, so I don't know. Wait, hold up.
I've played a ton. Think about it a bit. While you're thinking about it, I'll say that I've played a bunch, especially in the olden days. You had when was like E.T. was one of the first ones. It was an NES, and it was horrible. And you had games throughout the series, but there's actually some diamonds in the rough. There's a Kung Fu Panda game, I think it was based off the second film, that's actually really good. It has very intriguing combat. It felt a lot like Mini Ninjas, and it had like real combat and everything added to the story, and it actually added to it. And another one, there was a How to Train Your Dragon game that was actually pretty decent. There was an Avatar game that was actually pretty good, but most of them were junk. So many games based on movies are just like some cheapy like game, or maybe another game from another property with just the film slapped on it sticker.
Well, yeah, they use the film to sell the thing, but the other thing is that the film wasn't made to be a video game. So how do you... And they're also not going to hire top of the line game developers.
No, because it's a cheap marketing ploy. It's like, hey, we made a film on this. Let's make a video game too. We'll just get a few extra sales, and all we do is we just digitize the content and slap a label on it.
Yeah, and the issues that you're going to have going reverse film to video game is this: how do you make 10 hours of content off of an hour and a half of source material?
You have to extend it.
And the thing is that a lot of video games don't do that properly. There's only a few video games that do better than the movies, like or do well from a movie adaptation, like GoldenEye. That's one of them. The main one about that though was the 4-player shooters and stuff like that.
But it's a gameplay mechanic that was original. It was revolutionary for its time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just an adaptation of the film. It was a completely original concept that adapted the film to it.
Yeah.
And it adds a ton of extra story. There's missions that tell you what happens before the film. Like there's 4 missions that take place before the very beginning of the movie is him running from the dam and jumping off of it and rappelling down. But there's like 3 levels in the game that take place before that. You going in, doing your thing, and then getting out. Or you're landing there. He jumps, rappels to get inside or whatever. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of levels before that. And they expand upon when he goes out to the satellite location. He goes there a second time. Like there's a ton of expansion to the game that's actually really interesting.
Well, yeah, and the thing is that some video games that are based off of movies are really good. They're really well done. I think about the Spider-Man games that came out in the 2000s, X-Men.
Spider-Man 2
like
was one of my favorite games of all time. It was based off the Spider-Man 2 film.
Yep.
And it adds some new villains in it and stuff.
Yes.
Like, the first game the first villain you actually fight in the game is Shocker. And you see him and you get his quips. He's like, "Oh, hey, what are you supposed to be? Pillow Man? Oh wait, no, I got it. The Cushion."
Yeah, that was the first Spider-Man game.
Spider-Man
that was
game.
the first Spider-Man game.
But the first Spider-Man game felt like another one. The second one was open world.
Yep.
And it was like the first open world Spider-Man game. It was based on a film, and then that led to the Ultimate Spider-Man video game, which was based off the Ultimate Spider-Man comic profile, which was amazing, and it got its roots from that game. And even the new Spider-Man games, Spider-Man 3 was kind of a letdown because it was really short and it just couldn't follow the second one. But the new Spider-Man games, Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales, are solid because they
they're
took a
great.
lot of cues from those games.
Yeah.
Original stories and everything, but they took a lot. That was a movie to video game adaptation that led to a series.
Yeah, and the thing is,
that's a really good one. I forgot about that one. That's a solid game.
Like, all of those games are really solid, and the thing is that they added to the material while leaning into the materials that already existed. I think the superhero ones are a little bit of a cop-out, because you could just make a superhero game.
That's fair, but there's also plenty of bad ones, though.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of bad.
I mean, you look at like the original ones on NES, like the original Spider-Man on NES, it was basically just like a reshell of the Batman game. And it plays like that because you don't have the freedom of movement that Spider-Man normally has. Whereas the Batman game for NES is actually not too bad for what it was at the time, because it's just a little side scroller and Batman does his thing. But the Spider-Man one just doesn't work as well because it suffers from limitations, and you just doesn't feel like you're Spider-Man. But there was that one on PlayStation, which is like actually a lot of fun, where when you're on the rooftops, if you fall past where you just die because it's just the clouds.
Oh, that's my favorite. Like, that's one of my favorite video games of all time. The Spider-Man game that's based off of the TV show.
Yeah,
I love that game. I still remember that game.
Yeah, that's a fun one. So that's a TV show adapted to a video game. There's a lot of these adaptations that actually really work, and a lot that don't. And I think the difference there, whereas in the film, we've talked extensively about what the difference is. The video game adaptation from film is easier to spot. It's literally, is it a cash grab or do they take it seriously? Yeah. Because adapting movies to video games should be easier because you're adding, not taking away.
Right, you can add stuff that you deleted from the movie.
Yes.
And you can also expand upon other characters and stuff like that.
Like they do with the Spider-Man. So they add new villains, you add new plot points, you can add to it instead of taking away. When you go from video game to movie, you have to cut. When you go from movie to video game, you add.
Yeah.
And a lot of video game adaptations from film are just a cheap copy of the film, and then some are just amazing.
Yeah. Some of them are just cash grabs, and that's just the thing, is it's a money ploy.
Money talks.
Yeah, money talks.
Sometimes people buy video games based off popular films a lot more. I think they must, because they make a video game adaptation of like every film that gets made that's popular. They do not make a film adaptation of every video game that's popular. It's a one-way street. So I'm guessing people buy the video game adaptations of film in far larger numbers than they buy the film adaptations of video games.
That's fair.
Just because of the way that the studios do it, because they always do that. It always goes one way, not the other.
Yeah, it seems like almost every animated film that has any semblance of an adventure and action gets a video game adaptation.
There was a video game adaptation of Quest for Camelot on the Game Boy, and it's like Final Fantasy Adventure, like skinned as. It's actually a really fun game.
I thought that the only thing that survived from that movie was the song.
No, they're literally
the one song that does not fit.
There's an NES video. I know NES. There's a Game Boy video game, like Game Boy Color video game based on it, and it's actually kind of fun. I had it. Okay. I own a copy of it. I still have it to this day. I'll have to see if I can find it. Maybe I'll do a gameplay of it someday and show it. But it's actually a fun game. It is kind of a cash grab, but it's entertaining. And so that was just an example. There's a bajillion, anime has like bajillions of video game adaptations of them. They work really well for that medium. There's a lot of films that do really well in that medium as well. There's actually a game. We've gotten to the point now where we have video games based off a film that was based off a video game that was based off a film. There's one I was trying to think of in general. It was there's a series where it started out as a book, then it became a film, then a video game, then the video game got adapted into a film, and then the film got adapted back into a video game, and then the video game got adapted into a series. And you're just like, But I wish I'd have thought about what that was. I'm not going to look it up right now, but this we're getting to that point where mediums have been around for so long that we're adapting things back and forth that have already been adapted before, and it's just going to continue. Like adaptations are, if what you want out of entertainment is to stop adaptations, that's never going to happen. Some of the most popular mediums in history are adaptations. Original films are rare in general, and they're rarely successes above adaptations. adaptations usually are the things that do well. Even a lot of like the Oscar films are adaptations.
Yeah.
Like almost everything that you like that's a film or a TV series is an adaptation of something. A comic, a book series, a comic strip. Like they even had like comic strips in like newspapers. Rides, they adapted rides in Disney World into films.
That's true.
Pirates of the Caribbean,
Yep.
and like Hollywood, and people say they're starved for new original ideas. Well, the problem is the more media is made, the less original ideas are even possible. Like you get to the point where the algorithm of humanity can't come up with anything fully original. It's going to get harder and harder. But because even the books you're adapting things from are inspired by other things. Like nothing is original anymore. But you can twist it into original things with those characters. You can take an existing plot. You can take a movie that exists, like It's a Wonderful Life, and then put Mario in that film, and that would be an original idea. Because it would be a unique character that sits in that film and would act completely differently than the main character would in that film.
It's a whoa life.
But it's a silly concept, but that's the thing. You start taking original ideas by making old ideas new again, like a cover of a song. Like you can take an original song and make a cover of it, and it'd be a completely unique experience because
a lot of people find success doing that.
You move it to a different key, and then you put it in a different style. Like there's a lot of money to be made taking pop songs and making them country songs and making them rock songs and making them heavy metal. There's a heavy metal version by Disturbed of Silence.
Yeah, Sound of Silence.
Sound of Silence from Simon & Garfunkel. That is amazing, and it's the same song, same lyrics, but it's in a different style. That is what we are getting to in media, and that's what video game adaptations into film and vice versa, they're always going to be done. We just want them to be done better, and we're just trying to come up with ideas how that can be done. So that's all I really had for our show today. Do you want to add anything to the end to close this out?
I mean, standard typical stuff to close out. I mean, we have a YouTube channel. Go and check it out. If you're not watching this on YouTube, if we've talked about, I don't know if we're going to, but we've moved it over to Spotify possibly and Anchor. We do have a YouTube channel where we take bad films and we make fun of them and rewrite them. We're also doing a thing where we're watching old films and we're talking about what's iconic about them, what's really bad about them, and how we would adopt them and adapt them to modern times. We're also in the review business. I guess you could call it a review business. We watch a lot of films and we review them for you guys. We're constantly adding new things. This is a new channel. It's a new property and stuff like that. So we're excited to get into the realms of, doing new and interesting and unique things. So if you're watching this on YouTube, check us out on Facebook. Maybe check us out on Spotify. I mean, if you're listening to this on YouTube and it's on Spotify, you don't really have to do both. But if you're on Spotify, check out our YouTube because we have videos and we have a Facebook page, Entertainment Rebooted. And we'll soon be on Twitter. Next month, the plan is to get onto Twitter. So I hope that you guys are enjoying this kind of content, this freestyle and stuff. Let us know what kind of topics you'd like us to talk about, and if it fits into our recast here, we'll do a podcast about it.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks for listening.
Yep. Thanks.